It's clear to me that Lama Govinda is not only steeped in this Buddhist tradition, but he's also acutely aware of developments in the West that are somewhat compatible with the Buddhist view of consciousness. Developments in psychology at the time that are very different from the Freudian outlook, are developing a form of awareness that's quite compatible with the Buddhist outlook. And as you pointed out, a lot of this concern is from the focus on survival of the human personality after death. Frederick Meyer's great work is called Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. And it's interesting to put this in context. We have an interest in Buddhist and Asian traditions in American intellectual life, which is the tradition I know best, going back to the Transcendentalists. But their information was limited. Right? But Emerson, Thoreau, and other biggies of the Transcendentalist movement in the 1840s, 30s, 40s, 50s were getting quite interested in all of this. But we date a particular opening of the West to Eastern ways of thinking with the World Parliament of Religions, which took place in Chicago in 1893, and figures such as Swami Vivekananda became celebrated in the West and met William James and others. So I just wanted to point out some passages here in which Lama Govinda shows his acquaintance with much of these developments, and also leads into the kind of territory that Frederick Myers and others were examining that is so different from the materialist view of consciousness that dominates in the West. So on page 69, Lama Govinda is explaining his consciousness by saying that we're delving into the deeper levels of our subconsciousness. Now that's a new term. The term subconsciousness is a relatively new term in the early 20th century. And it comes out of the late 19th century. Myers used the term subliminal, but they had tuned in to the fact that we have forms of awareness that go way beyond the normal everyday consciousness of the rational mind. And he mentions here that these lamas had developed methods of contacting these deeper layers of the mind. This is a pretty Western way of talking, really. Meditation, trance, certain forms of oracles, and various supernatural psychic portents. And then he at the very end of the book, he's I'm on page 276 here. He really gives a summation of the drive that these psychologists were exploring, primarily through supernormal forms of awareness, people who clairvoyance, clairaudience, mediums who were seeming to get messages from the dead. They were exploring these things and wondering, what does this mean in terms of how we think of the psyche? And towards the end of the book, he gives a relation of a lama's encounter with what seemed to be a regional god. And there was something real going on there. The lama negotiated with the deity about how to handle the particular problem that they were sharing. And he says, This incident shows us that invisible forces, whether we call them gods or spirits, divine or demonical powers that influence the human mind, are not merely abstractions or outcomes of a sick mind, which was a Western way of looking at it, largely, but realities with which every religion and psychology has to cope. I could very well understand now the type of forces against which I'm sorry, I'm not good on this pronunciation, Padmasambhava had to fight, and that such forces could only be conquered or subdued by calling up counter forces in the human mind, which is exactly the function of ritualistic magic or magic ritual. And he says this is my last sentence, it leads perfectly into what we'll examine next month. We are dealing here with spiritual realities, not with theories, with actual forces, not with religion doctrine. Modern psychology had to accept the facts of hypnotism, autosuggestion, extrasensory perception, telepathy, mediumism, psychokinesis, faith healing, and the uncanny powers of our depth consciousness, irrespective of whether it fitted into the prevailing scientific theories or not. So in part inspired by these Eastern ideas that are filtering in from the West, and independent developments in the West, such as spiritualism, we're at a critical moment at this point when psychology explodes into the exploration of the subconscious mind and begins to see that it has capacities that are way beyond anything we can explain with the materialistic view of the mind. And that's what we will be getting into next month. So thank you, Jim, for that, giving me the opportunity for that entree.
With pleasure. I mean, and for those of you joining us, as undergraduates who are, in your 20-somethings, these matters may not seem particularly relevant to you, but I can assure you they will be. So that's one reason why we have Frederick Myers' work following the way of the white cloud, but also, as Mark is indicating, in the last 100 years, the Western, I would say, psychological domain, in the broadest sense of that term, has really been exploring areas very well known in the Eastern metaphysical tradition for millennia. But as Mark indicates, and Govinda, as a Westerner in Tibet, in some ways was bridging what was just emerging in the West with something that was very ancient in the East. But it's the synthesis between the two that I think over time is going to illuminate both. And that's one reason why the Way of the White Clouds and Frederick Myers' work are linked together in this particular GreatBooks series for 2016. So Mark, thank you so much. I'm mindful we need to leave the call within the next 6 minutes because there's another call coming in, unfortunately. But I'm just wondering, Dave, you have your hand up. Why don't you make one more comment and then we'll bring the call to a close. So Dave McQuarrie. And you're there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, super. I'm on a different computer, and there's also construction behind me too. Absolutely fascinating, Jim, as usual, and touches so many aspects of my own life. First of all, I was introduced to Vivekananda about 30 years ago, and was told that he might be significant to my life. So I easily found the complete works of Vivekananda in a synchronistic moment. And it opens with, Vivekananda was born in the early hours of January 12th, 1863. And I was born in the early hours of January 12th, 1943. So it was a wow experience. In addition, when I worked with George Rossner, who was a Gestalt Therapy of Toronto, George was a world-class therapist, and he was also the personal Shela of Lama Govinda, as in Govinda being the personal Shela of Tomo Geshe. So George was, I can't talk about how important George was to me. And then the third thing is that my own sort of explorations of what I've called entities as conscious spirits that are non-material has been such that all of these things seem to be coming together for me in this particular call. So it's too vast for me to really give it an appropriate answer, but just a deep, deep appreciation. And I also look forward to the studies of what I call other than conscious, because I don't like the Western term unconscious or subconscious. It's so much more than that. So all I can really say at this moment is wow.
Well, in the face of the Great Reaper, that's all any of us can say.
Indeed.
Other than that, and just smile.
Yeah.
So we need to bring this call to a close, unfortunately, but I really want to thank everyone for your patience, first of all, with some of the technical challenges that we endured in the course of this conversation today. I really want to emphasize the importance of Mark's lectures in July and August as a continuation of Anarika Govinda's Way of the White Clouds, because I think we're probing something here that is not only deep and vast, but directly relevant to all of us, because all of us are going to go through the death experience, and the more conscious we are of that fact, the more prepared we will be when that fact happens to us. And that's part of the GreatBooks program. We want to delve into issues of deep importance to the human individuals in the human community, on issues that aren't normally taken up in our ordinary lives. So thank you all. Obviously, we want to continue this dialogue on Facebook. We'll be getting the recording out to all of you as soon as we can, and then we'll continue our discussion, and we'll hear from Mark the second Tuesday of July, and then August, and then I'll be back in September, October with the Analects of Confucius. So thank you all, and thank you, Mark and Dave, for your contributions today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jim. Bye-bye.